Marcus Hall had everything a man could want. Money, power, a house that echoed with silence instead of laughter, a phone that never rang with voices that mattered. And when the diagnosis came, when his own body turned traitor, he learned something he'd spent 42 years avoiding. That success means nothing when you're dying alone. They came at first, the nurses, the caregivers, the professionals with their perfect resumes and practiced smiles. They looked at him, at the trembling hands, at the man who could no longer button his own shirt, at the slow, cruel unraveling of someone who once controlled everything, and they left one by one, with excuses that sounded reasonable but felt like abandonment, until there was no one, no family rushing to his side, no friends checking in, no son willing to put his life on pause. Just an empty mansion and a man running out of time. That's when she appeared. Claire. No experience. No references that mattered. No reason to stay when everyone else had already gone. Just a stranger walking into a job no one else could handle. He didn't know why she came. He didn't know why she stayed. But somewhere between the humiliation of needing help and the grace of receiving it without judgment, something shifted. Two people, both running from their own ghosts, found something neither expected: presence, dignity, a second chance at being human. This is not a story about dying. It's a story about what it means to truly live, even when time is running out, even when everyone else has walked away, even when all you have left is one stranger who refused to leave. Marcus Hall had never had to ask for anything twice, not because I was cruel, not because I yelled, simply because people knew who I was. And when someone knows who you are, things just fall into place. Doors open. Calls get answered. Problems disappear before they even reach your desk. That had been the case for 42 years. His house reflected that. It wasn't ostentatious, but it didn't need to be. Marble floors that were always spotless without him having to think about it. Huge windows overlooking a garden that someone kept immaculate. A kitchen where food appeared, prepared at the right times. Everything functioned like a silent clock. He paid well. She knew that. But she also knew that money wasn't the only thing that kept people around. It was stability, predictability, the fact that Marcus Hall never lost control. Until that morning in March, he was in his office, reviewing contracts. Nothing unusual. He had slept well. A light breakfast. Everything in order. But when he got up to pour himself more coffee, the cup slipped from his hand. It wasn't a clumsy accident. It was something else. His hand simply did not respond. The cup fell. It broke. And Marcus stared at his own fingers as if they belonged to someone else. He tried to clench his fist. Nothing. He tried again. A slight tremor. Then nothing. She didn't call anyone right away. She sat down. She breathed. She thought maybe it was just tiredness, stress. Too many hours in front of the computer. Things that fix themselves. But the next day the same hand couldn't hold a pen. And a week later he needed help buttoning his shirt. He didn't tell his assistant, or his driver, or even his personal physician at first, because saying it out loud would make it real. And Marcus Hall wasn't used to things being real that way. By the time he finally went to the hospital, he had already lost strength in both hands. The neurologist was direct. He didn't waste time beating around the bush. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. Marcus didn't ask what it meant. He already knew. He'd read enough, watched enough documentaries he never thought would affect him. How long? He asked. The doctor looked at him with that expression doctors often use. Professional compassion. 2 years, maybe 3. It depends on the progression. Marcus nodded. As if he'd been given a bad but manageable financial report. Treatment? We can slow down some symptoms. But there is no cure. Silence. Will I need help? The doctor nodded slowly. Eventually, yes. Constant help. Marcus left the hospital with a prescription in his pocket, and a new certainty settled in his chest. Everything he had built, everything he had controlled, was about to crumble. And the worst part wasn't the disease. The worst part was that, for the first time in her life, she didn't know how to ask someone to stay. The first 3 months were a well-constructed lie. Marcus hired a private physical therapist who came twice a week. He told his team at the company that he was reducing his workload, that he wanted to focus on more strategic projects. No one asked too many questions. Successful people always have reasons that others don't need to understand. But in private, things were beginning to change. First it was my hands, then my arms. Small things I used to do without thinking now required concentration. Opening a water bottle, signing a document. Cutting my nails, he started wearing shirts with larger buttons, shoes without laces. He stopped going to the gym because lifting weights had become impossible, and he didn't want anyone to see him trying. His assistant, Margaret, began to notice things. "Would you like me to bring you the coffee already served?" he asked one day carefully. Marcus looked at her. She held the jug in her hand, waiting. Yes, she finally said, "Thank you." She didn't ask why. But from that day on, he always brought her coffee ready. In meetings, Marcus began to delegate more, not because he wanted to, because typing on the computer was becoming slow, clumsy. His fingers weren't keeping pace with his mind, and that silently infuriated him. One afternoon, his son called him. Daniel, 34 years old. He lived in California. They spoke once a month, if that. "Dad, how are you?" "Good. Everything's normal. Are you sure?" "Margaret told me you canceled 2 trips this month." Marcus pressed the phone to his ear. Damn Margaret. "I'm tired, Daniel, that's all." There was a pause. "Do you want me to come see you?" "It's not necessary." Another silence. "Okay. Let me know if you need anything." Marcus hung up, not angrily, just with the feeling that the conversation had been exactly what he'd expected. Superficial, distant, comfortable for both of them. But by the 6th month, things were no longer manageable. Marcus dropped a plate in the kitchen. It shattered on the floor. He tried to bend down to pick up the pieces, but his legs didn't respond as quickly as he expected. He almost lost his balance. He stood there, staring at the ceramic fragments, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not fear of dying. I had already accepted that. Fear of need. Fear of dependence. Fear that someone would see him like that. That night he called his personal physician. "I need a nurse." "Someone who lives here." The doctor didn't sound surprised. "I'll send you options tomorrow." Marcus hung up and sat in his office, in the dark, listening to the silence of the house. She had built all of this. She had worked her whole life to be in control, to not depend on anyone, and now his own body was betraying him. He thought about his ex-wife. She had left 12 years ago, not because of illness, obviously, but because Marcus had never been present. Always working, always absent. She grew tired of waiting for a man who never came. She thought about Daniel, about how they had let the distance become normal. He thought about Margaret, about the employees, about all those people who worked for him, but who, if he disappeared tomorrow, would go on with their lives without a problem. And for the first time, Marcus Hawley felt completely alone. Not because there weren't people around him, but not because nobody was there for him, only for what he represented. And when that disappeared, who would be left? The first nurse lasted 11 days. Her name was Patricia, 50-something years old, impeccable resume. She had worked with terminally ill patients before. She arrived with suitcases, a professional smile, and a list of references that Marcus didn't even read. The first few days were uncomfortable, but functional. Patricia helped him get dressed in the mornings. She prepared his meals. She reminded him to take his medication, all efficiently, without drama. Marcus tried not to look at her too much when she helped him with things he used to do on his own. Buttoning his shirt, cutting his food, holding his glass while he drank. It was humiliating, but necessary. On the 10th day, Patricia entered her office with a serious expression. "Mr. Hall, I need to talk to you." Marcus looked up. He already knew what was coming. "My husband is sick. He needs surgery. I have to go home." Marcus nodded slowly. "When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow morning." "I'm so sorry." It didn't sound like he was sorry. It sounded like someone who had come up with an acceptable excuse. "Okay," Marcus said. "Thanks for your time." She left the next day, without looking back. The second nurse arrived 2 weeks later. Nicole, younger, 28 years old. Less experience, but Margaret said she was the best available at the time. Nicole lasted 6 days. He didn't offer elaborate excuses. He simply said the job wasn't what he expected, that he needed something with more flexible hours, that he was very sorry. Marcus did not argue. The third nurse didn't even complete the first week. He arrived, saw the house, saw Marcus, and on the third day said he had a family emergency. Margaret stopped sending options after the 4th resignation. "Mr. Hall," she said carefully over the phone, "the agencies say it's difficult to find staff who want to live here full time. They say the case is complex." Marcus didn't ask what complex meant. He already knew. It meant he was a dying man. It meant the work was hard. It meant no one wanted to be near this slow decline of someone who had once held power. "And you, Margaret?" Marcus asked. "When are you leaving?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mr. Hawley, I have an offer from another company. I was going to tell you next week." Marcus closed his eyes. "I understand. I'm sorry. I really am. Don't apologize. You have the right to move on." Margaret left 2 weeks later, and with it the last connection to her previous life. Daniel called once during that time. "Dad, how's everything going?" Marcus was sitting in his chair, with a blanket over his legs because he could no longer regulate his body temperature well. "Good. Everything is fine." "Did you get a nurse?" "Yes, everything is under control." It was a lie. But Marcus wasn't going to tell his son he needed him. Not like this. "Okay, I'll call you soon." He didn't call. The household staff also began to disappear. The gardener stopped coming. The driver took indefinite leave. The cleaning lady sent her daughter a couple of times, but then she stopped showing up too. Marcus tried calling some acquaintances, people he had done business with, people who owed him favors. The calls were brief, awkward. "Marcus, sure, anything you need. But right now I'm in the middle of—" "I understand. Don't worry. I just wanted to say hello. No one offered help. No one really asked how I was." And Marcus stopped calling. One night, sitting in the empty room with the lights off and the heavy silence above him, Marcus realized something. It wasn't just that people were leaving. It was that they had never really been there. They had been close to his money, to his influence, to his power, but never near him. And now that those things were starting to not matter, neither was he. She stayed there in the darkness, feeling the house grow bigger and emptier. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Holly understood what it was like to be completely abandoned. Marcus stopped trying to keep up appearances. He no longer shaved every day. He no longer wore suits. Most mornings he stayed in his pajamas until noon, not because he wanted to, but because getting dressed had become a 30-minute battle that left him exhausted. The house was beginning to show signs of neglect. Dust on the surfaces, unwashed dishes in the sink, unopened mail piled on the hall table. Marcus tried to hire an hourly cleaning service. They came once. They saw a man in a wheelchair, trembling as he tried to hold a cup of tea, and they never returned. She called 3 more nursing agencies. The first one told her that they didn't have any staff available. The second one told him that the case required specialized care that they did not offer. The third one was honest. "Mr. Howe, with all due respect, your situation requires someone who is willing to stay long-term. And with Al's, most of our staff prefer less demanding cases." Marcus hung up without saying anything else. Demanding, that was the elegant word. What they really meant was, nobody wants to see a man fall apart. He tried to post an ad. He typed it himself, his fingers trembling on the keyboard, taking almost an hour to complete 3 paragraphs. Full-time caregiver wanted. Competitive salary. Accommodation included. Experience in palliative care preferred but not required. Discretion and commitment essential. He received 4 responses. The first was from someone who clearly just wanted to live in a big house without working too hard. Marcus knew this from the questions. Do I have my own bathroom? Is there a gym? Can I have visitors? The second person arrived for the interview, looked at Marcus, and said that he had just remembered another engagement. The third one never appeared. The fourth was an older man, a former military nurse, with a stony face and firm hands. "How much time do you have left?" he asked bluntly. Marcus looked at him, surprised by the frankness. "A year, maybe less." The man nodded. "I can do the job, but I need 2 days off every 2 weeks. And if you speak to me disrespectfully, I'm leaving." Marcus agreed. Anything to avoid being alone. The man lasted 3 weeks. Not because Marcus disrespected him, but because one night Marcus had a respiratory attack. He couldn't cough properly. He couldn't clear his throat. He started choking on his own saliva. The nurse helped him. He cleaned his mouth. He patted him on the back. He kept him alive. But the next day, without saying much, the man packed his bags. "I can't," he said simply. "I've seen too many men die. I don't want to see any more, and he left. Marcus was left alone again, this time for a longer period of the months. 2 months in which he learned to survive on the bare minimum. He ate what he could prepare without help: cereal, bread, things that didn't require a knife or a stove. She stopped bathing regularly because getting in and out of the shower without help was dangerous. She fell once in the hallway. Her legs just gave way. He lay on the floor for 20 minutes trying to get up, until he finally managed to crawl to a chair and use it for support. Nobody came to help him. Because there was nobody there, Daniel called once more during that time. "Dad, I just wanted to see how you were." Marcus was sitting in the living room wearing the same clothes he had worn for 3 days straight, looking out the window at a garden that no one took care of anymore. "I'm fine." "Did you get a nurse?" "I'm in the process." "Okay, let me know if you need anything." Marcus knew he wouldn't warn them, and Daniel knew he wouldn't warn them, but they both continued to act as if words meant something. One afternoon, Marcus was sitting in his office, looking at an old photograph. Him, younger, his ex-wife, Daniel, as a child. Vacation at some beach. Everyone was smiling. But Marcus didn't remember that day. He didn't remember how he'd felt. He only remembered that he was probably thinking about work, about calls he had to make, about contracts he had to review, always absent, even when he was there. And now, when I really needed someone, there was no one. She placed the photo on the desk and closed her eyes. She didn't cry, not because she was strong, but because crying required energy she no longer had. She just stood there, breathing slowly, wondering if this was how it was going to end, alone, in an empty house, waiting for his body to finally give out. But then, 3 days later, the phone rang. It was a small agency, one that Marcus didn't even remember contacting. "Mr. Holly, we have someone who might be interested. She doesn't have much formal experience, but she has cared for sick relatives before. She's available immediately." Marcus didn't ask anything else. "Send it." He hung up. I had no expectations. I had already learned not to have them. But at least for a moment there was a possibility. One last chance that someone would stay. He arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus was in the living room, sitting in his chair, staring out the window. He had stopped actively waiting. He was just there, existing. He heard the doorbell, then footsteps. The front door opened. He didn't get up. He couldn't do it quickly anymore. And besides, if this person was going to work for him, she'd better get used to seeing him like this. Motionless, frail, the footsteps drew closer. Marcus turned his head, and he saw her. It wasn't what I expected. She wasn't an older woman with years of experience. She wasn't someone in a medical uniform with a professional expression. She was young, 30, maybe 32. Brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, worn jeans, a gray jacket over a white t-shirt, a backpack slung over one shoulder. She didn't look like a nurse. She looked like someone who had just gotten off a bus. She stood in the doorway of the room, looking at him. Marcus looked back at her. Neither of them spoke immediately. She didn't smile. She didn't extend her hand. She didn't make any of those rehearsed gestures that people make when they want to appear professional. She just looked at him, with those calm eyes, as if she were assessing him, but not with pity, nor with discomfort, just looking at it. Finally she spoke. "I'm Claire." Her voice was low, clear, unadorned. Marcus nodded. Marcus Healy. Silence again. Claire slowly placed her backpack on the ground without taking her eyes off the road. The agency told me that she needs help. Yeah, what kind of help? Marcus looked at her, directly, without softening the blow. I have a LS amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. I'm dying. Slowly, I need someone to live here, to help me eat, bathe, and move around, to be there when I can no longer do anything on my own. He waited for her to look away, for her to say something awkward, for her to find a polite way out, but Claire just nodded. I understand. People don't stay, Marcus continued. They say they will, but they don't. They last days, weeks, if I'm lucky, and then they leave. So if you're here just because you need money fast, you'd better tell me now. Claire looked at him silently for a long moment. Then he spoke. I'm not here for quick money. Then why are you here? She didn't answer right away. She looked around the room. The expensive furniture, the accumulated dust, the half-closed curtains, the feeling of neglect that hung in the air. Finally, she looked at him again. Because someone has to be. Marcus frowned. That's not a reason. It's the only one I have. She didn't sound defensive, nor sentimental, just honest. Marcus didn't know what to say to that. Claire picked up her backpack. Where am I going to sleep? Marcus blinked. He hadn't expected her to be so direct. Upstairs. Second door on the left. There's a room with a private bathroom. Claire nodded. What time do you need help in the morning? 7, maybe 7:30. All right. She turned around and went upstairs. Without asking any more questions, without requesting a tour, without making any comments about the house, it just went up. Marcus stayed there in his chair, listening for footsteps on the second floor, the sound of a door opening, then silence. I didn't know what to think. Claire hadn't done any of the things the others had done. She hadn't smiled much. She hadn't promised anything. She hadn't tried to make him feel comfortable. I had simply accepted it, as if it were just a fact, a reality. Marcus looked out the window again. The garden was neglected. Dry leaves accumulated in the corners. The grass was too long. Everything was falling to pieces. But for the first time in months, someone had entered the house without fear in their eyes. Someone had stayed behind, at least for today, and that, in a way, was enough. The first morning was awkward. Claire came downstairs at 7 o'clock sharp. Same clothes as the day before, hair up, no makeup, not trying to look like anything other than what she was. Marcus was already awake. He'd been awake since 5. That's how it was now. Sleep had become elusive, fragmented. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his shirt. Small buttons. Fingers that no longer obeyed. He heard her knocking on the door. Forward. Claire came in. She looked at him. She looked at his shirt. Do you need help? Marcus clenched his jaw. He hated that question, even when the answer was obvious. Yeah, she approached, without saying anything else, without drama. She took the shirt from his hands. She knelt in front of him. She began to button it, one by one. Marcus looked away, towards the window. Anywhere but her, it was humiliating. Having someone kneeling in front of you, dressing you up like a child. But Claire didn't act as if it were humiliating. She acted as if it were simply a task, something that had to be done. When he finished, he stood up. Breakfast? Coffee. Toast. She nodded and left. Marcus stood there, feeling the weight of the shirt on his shoulders, wondering how much longer he could endure this. The first few days continued like this. Claire did what needed to be done, without asking too many questions, without saying too much. She prepared his meals. She helped him get dressed. She accompanied him to the bathroom when necessary. She cut his food into small pieces. She held his glass while he drank, and Marcus accepted it, because he had no choice, but they didn't speak, not about real things. She asked practical questions. Would you like more water? Does anything hurt? Do you need the medicine now or later? And he would answer in monosyllables. Yes, no, later. Nothing else. It was easier that way. No connection. No questions about who he was, who he had been, why he was alone. But Claire didn't offer anything of herself either. She didn't talk about her life, where she came from, why she had accepted this job. She was just doing her job, quiet, efficient, present. Marcus didn't know whether that reassured him or worried him. One evening after dinner, Marcus was in the living room, watching the news on television. Claire was in the kitchen, washing dishes. He watched her from afar. Calm movements, unhurried. Why are you staying? He asked suddenly. Claire stopped what she was doing. She didn't turn around immediately. She just finished rinsing the plate she was holding. She put it in the dish rack. She dried her hands with a cloth. Then he turned around. I already told him. You didn't tell me anything. She looked at him with those calm eyes. Someone has to be here. It's me. That's all. Marcus frowned. That's not an answer. Claire crossed her arms. Not defensively, just waiting. What answer do you want? Marcus didn't know what to say. Did he want to know if she felt sorry for him? Did he want to know if she was only there for the money? Did he want to know if she would also leave when things got tougher? Probably all of that. But he didn't ask any of that. Forget it, he muttered, turning his attention back to the television. Claire said nothing more. She went back to the kitchen. But that night, before going up to her room, she stopped at the entrance to the living room. Mr. Holly. Marcus looked up. I'm not going anywhere, he said simply, and he went up the stairs. Marcus stayed there in the darkness, with the murmur of the television in the background. I didn't know whether to believe him, but something about the way he said it, without emotion, without exaggerated promises, made me want to believe. The days went by. Claire didn't change. She didn't become warmer. She didn't start talking more. She didn't try to be her friend. I was just there. Every morning, every night. When Marcus fell, she would help him up without saying anything about the accident. When he was too shaky to eat alone, she would hold his spoon for him without making him feel like an invalid. When he was in a bad mood, she gave him space. But she didn't leave. And little by little, Marcus began to notice something. It wasn't just that Claire was physically there. It was because she didn't look at him the way the others had. Not with pity, not with discomfort, not with that poor man expression. She looked at him as if he were just a man, not a dying millionaire, not a walking tragedy, just a man who needed help. And that, strangely, gave him back some dignity. One afternoon, while Claire was helping him put on his shoes, Marcus spoke. "Thank you." She looked up. Because Marcus didn't know how to explain it. not with words that didn't sound ridiculous. For staying, Claire didn't smile, but something in her expression softened, just barely. "You don't have to thank me. Yes, I have." She finished tying her shoes. She stood up. "Do you want to go out into the garden?" Marcus looked out the window. The garden was still neglected, but the sun was shining brightly. "Yeah." Claire helped him up. She took him outside. They sat on the porch, in silence. But this time the silence did not feel empty. He felt comfortable, as if they both understood that they didn't need to fill the space with words. Marcus closed his eyes. He felt the sun on his face, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. Claire began exploring the house while Marcus was asleep, not out of morbid curiosity, but because there were things that needed attention, things that no one had touched in months. The first time she went up to the attic, she found boxes and boxes of documents, old contracts, newspaper clippings, dusty family photos. He didn't open anything. He just made a mental note. This would have to be sorted out eventually. In the main study, he found open folders on the desk, unanswered letters, unpaid bills, everything half finished. Marcus had stopped managing his own life long before she arrived. One afternoon, while cleaning the kitchen, Claire found a crumpled letter in the trash can. She shouldn't have taken it out, but something about the way it was crumpled, with anger, with frustration, made her stop. She unfolded it. It belonged to Daniel, his son. "Dad, I understand you're going through a difficult time, but I need you to understand that I have my own life, too. I can't drop everything to be there for you. I've spoken with lawyers about a power of attorney. I think it's time we considered long-term care options. There are some very good places, professional. I know it's not what you want to hear, but it's the most sensible thing to do." Claire stopped reading. She crumpled the letter again. She put it back in the trash. He didn't say anything to Marcus, but something in his chest tightened. That man had a son who was alive, healthy, with resources, and I was abandoning him. That night, while serving Marcus dinner, Claire watched him silently. He ate slowly, with effort. Each bite was a small battle, but he didn't complain. He never complained. "Do you have family nearby?" Claire asked suddenly. Marcus looked up, surprised. It was the first personal question she had asked. "I have a son, in California. Are you coming to visit him?" Marcus put down his fork. He looked at his plate. "It's busy." Claire said nothing, but Marcus felt the weight of the silence. "I was never a good father," he continued, unprompted. "I worked all the time. I was never around. When his mother left, he was 12. I didn't change. I kept working. He grew up without me." Claire still said nothing. "Now you can't blame him," Marcus said wearily. "I built this distance." Claire sat down across from him. For the first time, she'd never done that before. She always ate in the kitchen. After him. "You didn't create your illness," he said calmly. Marcus looked at her. "No, but I built my solitude." Claire held his gaze. "Maybe, but that doesn't mean she deserves it now." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. Claire got up. She cleared the dishes. She went back to the kitchen. But something had changed. A small crack in the wall they had both maintained. In the following days, Claire began to ask questions. Small, casual. "What did you do before? Investments?" "Real estate," Some technology companies. Did you like it? Marcus thought about it. I liked winning. I'm not sure I liked the work itself. Claire nodded, without judgment. Another afternoon, while I was helping him walk down the hallway, "Do you miss anyone?" Marcus stopped, leaning on his arm. "To my ex-wife, sometimes, not because I wanted her back, but because she knew me. She really knew me, and she left anyway." Claire looked at him. "Maybe she didn't leave because you were bad. Maybe she left because she was tired of waiting for you to be there." Marcus felt a sharp pain in his chest. "Yes, probably." They continued walking. That night, Claire went up to the attic again. This time she did open one of the boxes. Photos. Dozens of photos. Marcus, younger, wearing a suit. Smiling at corporate events. Marcus with a beautiful woman. She's smiling. He's looking at the camera, but with a distant expression. Marcus with a small child. The child is holding his hand. Marcus is looking at his watch. Claire slowly flipped through the photos. A whole life captured in images. But in none of them did Marcus seem truly present. Always looking the other way. Always thinking about something else. Claire closed the box. She went downstairs. Marcus was in the living room, dozing. She stood in the doorway, looking at him. This man had had it all. Money, power, family, and he had lost everything. Not because of the illness. I had lost it long before. Because he never learned how to be. Claire felt something she hadn't expected to feel. No pity, sadness. Sadness for a man who had lived his entire life absent from his own life. And now, when I was finally present, because I had no other choice, there was no one left to be with, except for her. A stranger who arrived because no one else wanted to stay. Claire approached. She placed a blanket over his legs. Slowly, Marcus opened his eyes. He looked at her. "Are you okay?" he asked, half asleep. Claire nodded. "Yes, go to sleep." Marcus closed his eyes again, and Claire stood there, looking at him, wondering if she could change anything, if she could give him something that everyone else had taken away. Presence, dignity, company, not because he deserved it, but because no one should die alone. Nobody. Things started to change without either of them saying it out loud. Claire stopped eating alone in the kitchen. Now she put 2 plates on the table. She sat across from Marcus. They ate together. They didn't talk much, but the company was there. Sometimes Marcus would comment on the news. Claire would listen. Sometimes she would reply. Sometimes she wouldn't, but he was always present. One morning, while she was helping him shave, something Marcus could no longer do on his own, she spoke. "Have you ever thought about doing things differently?" Marcus looked at her through the mirror. "What are you talking about?" With his family, with his life. Marcus remained silent as she carefully ran the razor along his cheek. "All the time," he finally said. "But I never did it." "Because," Marcus sighed, "because I thought I had time. I thought the important things could wait. That work was what mattered. That money was what mattered." Claire cleaned the razor. She continued, "And now? Now I know I was wrong." She finished shaving him. She cleaned his face with a damp towel. "It's not too late," she said gently. Marcus looked at her, confused. "I'm dying, Claire, I know, but he's still alive." He said nothing more, but Marcus kept thinking about those words all day. He is still alive. That afternoon, Marcus did something he hadn't done in months. He asked Claire to take him to the studio, to help him sit down at the computer. "What do you need?" she asked. "I want to write a letter." Claire didn't ask who. She just opened a new document. She adjusted her chair. She stood behind him, waiting. Marcus stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then he began to dictate. "Daniel, comma. I know we haven't really talked in a long time, period. I know a lot of that is my fault, period." Her voice cracked slightly. Claire waited. "I'm not writing to ask you to come over, period. I'm not writing to make you feel guilty, period. I just want you to know that I'm sorry I wasn't the father you deserved, period." Long pause. "I'm sorry for every time I wasn't there. Every game I missed, every dinner I didn't make it to, every time I chose work over you. I can't change that now. But I can tell you that if I could go back, I would do everything differently." Claire kept writing, silently, without interrupting. "I don't expect you to forgive me, period. I just want you to know that you're the best thing I ever did, even if I didn't show it, period. And that I'm proud of the man you've become, despite me, not because of me." Marcus closed his eyes. "I love you, comma, son, period. I always have, period. I just never knew how to show it, period. With love, comma, Dad, period." Silence. Claire saved the document. "Do you want me to send it?" Marcus hesitated. For a long time. Then he nodded. "Yeah." Claire found Daniel's email address in Marcus's old contacts. She attached the letter. She sent it. He said nothing about whether he thought Daniel would respond or not. He just did it. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd done the right thing. If Daniel would read the letter. If he'd even care. At 3 a.m, he heard footsteps in the hallway. The door to his room opened slowly. Ira Claire. "Is everything all right?" she asked in a low voice. "I can't sleep." She came in. She sat down in the chair next to the bed. "Do you want to talk?" Marcus looked at her in the dim light. "Why are you doing this?" "What thing?" "Stay. Take care of me. Worry about me." Claire did not respond immediately. Marcus insisted. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. You could be anywhere else. Why are you here?" Claire looked towards the window. The moonlight filtered in dimly. "My father died 3 years ago," he finally said. Marcus waited. He had cancer. He was diagnosed at stage 4. They gave him 6 months. He lived 8. Her voice was calm, devoid of emotion. But Marcus could sense the weight behind her words. "I took care of him the last 3 months. Day and night. It wasn't easy. He was proud. He didn't want help. But I had no choice. Break. He died at home, with me holding his hand. And before he died, he said, 'Thank you. That's all. Thank you.'" Claire looked at him again. "No one should die without that. Without someone there. Without someone who sees their humanity until the very end." Marcus felt something in his throat. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. "I'm sorry," he said. "You don't have to feel that way. I'm just explaining why I'm here. Why do I remind you of your father?" Claire shook her head. "No, because I know what it's like to be alone when you need someone the most, and I don't want anyone else to go through that." Marcus didn't know what to say. Claire got up. "Try to sleep. I'm here if you need me." He left the room. Marcus stood there in the darkness, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Gratitude. Not because of the money he could give. Not because of what he could offer. Just to be seen. Just to be accompanied. For not being alone. The following days were different. Marcus started talking to her more, asking her questions. Do you have a family? A sister? She lives in another state. Does it surprise you? Claire smiled slightly, barely, probably, but understand. What do you understand? This is what I need to do now. Marcus nodded. Another day, as Claire helped him walk around the garden, which she had gradually begun to take care of, Marcus spoke. Thank you. Claire looked at him. He already told me. I know. But I need to say it again. She didn't answer. They just kept walking. But something had changed between them. They were no longer just a patient and his caregiver. They were two people who had found something unexpected. Company, I respect, humanity. And although Marcus knew his time was running out, for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was dying alone. It felt like I was truly living. Even if it's just a little, even if it's at the end, I was living. Daniel did not reply to the letter. A week passed. Then 2. Then 3. Marcus checked his email every morning. Claire helped him open the computer. He looked at his inbox. Nothing. He said nothing. But Claire could see the disappointment in his eyes. Maybe she didn't receive it, she said one morning. Marcus shook his head. She received it. She just decided not to respond. Perhaps it needs time. Maybe he doesn't care. Claire didn't insist. But then, one Thursday afternoon, the doorbell rang. Claire was in the kitchen. Marcus was in the living room, dozing. She went to open the door. A man in his 30s, dark hair, expensive suit, suitcase in hand. Can I help you? Claire asked. The man looked at her in surprise, as if he hadn't expected to find anyone there. I'm Daniel Hawley. I've come to see my father. Claire nodded. She stepped aside. Pass. Daniel entered, looking around. The house was cleaner than the last time he'd been there, but he still felt that air of neglect, of time standing still. Who are you? He asked. Claire, I take care of your father. Daniel frowned. Since when? Have the months? 2 months? And nobody told me? Claire looked at him calmly. His father didn't want to bother him. Daniel opened his mouth to say something, but stopped himself, because he knew she was right. He knew he himself had made it clear that he didn't want to be bothered. Where is it? He finally asked. In the living room. Daniel walked that way. Claire followed him silently. Marcus was awake now. He had heard voices, and when he saw his son standing in the doorway, something in his expression changed. Surprise, hope, fear. Daniel. Daniel stood there, staring at him. Her father had changed. A lot. He was thinner, more frail. His face had that pallor that comes with illness. His hands trembled in his lap. Hi, Dad. Awkward silence. Claire retreated to kitchen, but she stayed nearby, just in case. Daniel came in. He sat on the sofa opposite his father. He put his suitcase on the floor. I received your letter, he said. Marcus nodded slowly. I wasn't expecting you to come. I wasn't expecting to come either. Another silence. Daniel looked around. Then he looked back at it. You look bad. I'm dying. Daniel flinched, as if the words had struck him. I know, I just didn't think it would be this far along. Move quickly." Daniel clasped his hands on his knees. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call me when it started?" Marcus looked at him with those tired eyes. "Because I thought you wouldn't mind." Daniel tensed up. "How can you say that? Because it's true." Daniel got up. He started pacing back and forth. "That's not true. You're my father. Of course I care." "So where were you?" The question hung in the air. Daniel stopped. He looked at his father. I was busy. I have a job. I have a life. We all have a life, Daniel." "That's not an excuse." Daniel felt something hot rising in his throat. Anger. Frustration. "You can't blame me for moving on with my life. You were never in mine. Why would you expect me to drop everything for you now?" Marcus looked at him, not with anger, only with sadness. "I don't expect it. But you can't pretend you care when you've never shown it." "I'm not the one who was never there," Daniel said, his voice rising. "That was you. You were the one who was always working. The one who never came home. The one who forgot birthdays, games, everything." "I know." Daniel blinked. "That?" "I know," Marcus repeated. "You're right. I was a bad father. I wasn't there. I failed you." Daniel wasn't expecting that. He was expecting defenses, excuses. No, acceptance. "Then why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why did you never change?" Marcus closed his eyes. "Because I thought I had time. I thought I could fix it later. When I finished this project, when I closed that deal. Always later. But later never came." Daniel sat down again, more slowly, "and now it's too late." Marcus opened his eyes. He looked at him. "Yes, but at least I can tell you I'm sorry, and that you're the best thing I ever did, even though I messed it up." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest, something that had been kept inside for years. "I just wanted you to see me," she said, her voice trembling. "I wanted you to matter more to me than your job. I know, and you deserve that. You deserve more." Tears began to stream down Daniel's face. He couldn't stop them. "I hated you for a long time. I know. And now I don't know what to feel." Marcus extended his hand, trembling, weak. Daniel looked at her. Then, slowly, he took her. "You don't have to forgive me," Marcus said. "I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I really am." Daniel squeezed his father's hand, feeling how fragile he was, how close he was to the end. "I'm sorry, too," Daniel said. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. I'm sorry I avoided you. I'm sorry I didn't try." Marcus shook his head. "You have nothing to regret." "Yes, I do, because you are my father. And even though you weren't perfect, you're still my father. And I should have been here." They stood there, holding hands, crying silently. Claire watched them from the kitchen. Her eyes were wet. This was what Marcus needed. Not a cure. Not more time. That's all. Sorry. Recognition. One last chance to be father and son. Really. Daniel stayed that night. And the next? And the next, he didn't leave. He slept in the guest room. He ate with his father. He helped him walk. He talked to him. He actually spoke about the past, about the mistakes, about the love that was always there, even though buried under layers of absence and resentment. And Claire gave them space. But she stayed close, because I knew this was fragile, that this was precious, and that it wouldn't last forever. Marcus deteriorated rapidly after that, as if her body had been waiting for her to make peace, waiting for her to say what she needed to say. And now that he had done it, he was giving up. She could no longer walk, not even with help. Claire and Daniel moved him around in a wheelchair, from the bed to the living room, from the living room to the garden. Wherever he could feel the sun, he could no longer eat solid food. Claire prepared soft things for him, soups, purees. He tried to swallow, but it became increasingly difficult, and talking was becoming almost impossible. Her voice came out in whispers, incomplete sentences, words that were lost in the air, but his eyes remained awake, alert, present. One afternoon, as Claire was helping him lie down, Marcus stopped her with his gaze. She understood. She sat down next to him. "What do you need?" Marcus tried to speak. His mouth moved, but the words didn't come out properly. "Thank you." Claire shook her head. "You don't have to thank me." Marcus persisted, with his eyes, with everything he had left. "You gave me life." Claire felt something break in her chest. "You brought yourself into this world," he said gently. "I was just here." Marcus smiled, barely, a small, tired gesture. "No, just see." Claire understood. "I hadn't just been physically present. I had seen him, really seen him, as a person, not as a case, not as a job." "You saw me too," Claire said. "You gave me a purpose when I needed it." Marcus closed his eyes. He clenched his hand. She stayed there, holding his hand until he fell asleep. Daniel came in shortly after. He looked at his sleeping father. Then he looked at Claire. "I don't know how to thank you." Claire stood up. She made room for him to sit down. "It's not necessary." Daniel sat down by the bed. He looked at his father, so frail, so different from the man he remembered from his childhood. "You were right," Daniel said. "He was still alive, and I almost lost him." Claire put a hand on his shoulder. "But you didn't lose him. They're here, together." Daniel nodded, with tears in his eyes. "Thank you for not leaving him alone." Claire left the room. She gave them privacy. She stood in the hallway, looking out the window. The garden was better now. She had tended to it little by little. The flowers were beginning to grow again. The grass was cut. The dry leaves were gathered. Everything was returning to order, except for Marcus. He was fading away. That night, Marcus had trouble breathing. Claire and Daniel took turns being with him, holding his hand, reminding him that he wasn't alone. At 3 a.m, Marcus opened his eyes. He looked at Daniel. "I love you, son." Daniel squeezed her hand. "I love you too, Dad." Marcus smiled. One last time. Then he looked at Claire. "Thank you for staying." Claire approached. She took his other hand. "Always," he said simply. Marcus closed his eyes, and he never opened them again. Her breathing slowed, softer. Daniel and Claire stood there, one on each side, holding hands, until her breathing stopped. And Marcus Hall died, not alone, not abandoned, not in a cold hospital with strangers around. He died at home, with his son, with someone who had cared for him until the end. He died with dignity. Daniel cried. Claire did too, but silently. They stayed there for a long time, without letting go, because that last moment mattered. That last act of love mattered. The following days were a mix of paperwork, calls, and arrangements. Daniel arranged the funeral. It was small, intimate, just a few people. Colleagues Marcus had met. Some former employees. Claire was there. In the back row, silent. After the service, Daniel approached her. "I want you to know something," he said. "My father changed his will 2 weeks ago. He showed it to me before." Before it happened, Claire looked at him, not understanding. "He left you something, not much, but enough for you to know that he valued what you did." Claire shook her head. "I don't need anything." "I know, but he wanted you to have it, and he even wrote a letter. For you." Daniel handed her an envelope. Claire took it, with trembling hands. That night, in her room, she opened it. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible, but it was his. "Claire, I don't know how to thank you for what you did. Not just taking care of me, but seeing me when no one else did. You gave me something I didn't know I needed. Companionship, dignity, humanity. I can't repay you for that, but I can tell you that you changed my life in the final moments when it mattered most. Thank you for staying. Thank you for not giving up on me. I hope you find peace. I hope you know that what you do matters always. Marcus." Claire closed the letter. She cried, not just out of sadness, but because he had done something that mattered. He had been there until the very end, and that was enough. A few weeks later, Claire left the house. Daniel sold it. He didn't want to keep it. It held too many memories, good and bad. But before leaving, Claire walked through the garden one last time. The flowers kept growing. The grass was still green. Everything was still alive. Although Marcus didn't, she smiled, barely. "Thank you for letting me stay," she said softly, and he left, with the certainty that I had done the right thing, that he had given dignity to someone who had lost it, that he had witnessed a silent transformation, from abandonment to presence, from solitude to companionship, from solitary death to accompanied departure, and that, in the end, was all that mattered. We spend so much of our lives building things, careers, fortunes, reputations. We fill our calendars. We chase success. We convince ourselves that being busy means being alive. But somewhere in all that building, we forget the simplest truth, that none of it matters if we're doing it alone. Marcus Howell learned that lesson the hard way. He built an empire, but he lost his family. He gained the world, but he couldn't keep the people who mattered. And when his body started failing, when everything he'd built started crumbling, he discovered something terrifying, that he'd spent his entire life absent from his own life, present in boardrooms, absent at dinner tables, present in meetings, absent at baseball games, present everywhere, except where it mattered. But here's what's remarkable about his story. It's not that he died. It's that before he did, he finally learned to live. Because Claire didn't just take care of his body. She saw him not as a millionaire, not as a dying man, not as a tragedy, just as a person who deserved dignity, who deserved presence, who deserved to be seen. And in those final months, something transformed. Marcus reconnected with his son, not perfectly, but honestly he said the words he'd been too proud to say. "I'm sorry. I love you. I was wrong." He stopped hiding behind excuses and faced the truth of what he'd lost. And in doing that, he found something he'd been searching for his whole life, peace. So let me ask you something. Who are you absent from right now? What relationship are you putting off until later, assuming there will always be time? What words are you not saying because you think you can say them tomorrow? Because here's the truth Marcus learned too late. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed. The people you love won't wait forever. And the things that really matter, the moments, the presence, the connection that can't be bought or built or scheduled for later, they only exist now. Claire understood that. She showed up. She stayed. She gave Marcus something no amount of money could buy, her presence. And in return, she gave herself something just as valuable, purpose, meaning, the knowledge that she made a difference when it mattered most. None of us know how much time we have, but we all have a choice. We can keep building, keep chasing, keep convincing ourselves that success is measured in achievements, or we can stop, look around, and ask ourselves, am I present in my own life? Am I showing up for the people who matter? Am I living, or just existing? Marcus spent most of his life getting that wrong, but in the end he got it right, not because he had more time, but because he finally understood what time was for. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own life, your own relationships, your own presence, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss more stories that remind us what it means to be human. And maybe, just maybe, reach out to someone you've been meaning to call, because none of us should die alone. And none of us should live that way either.